That's the ticket. I tell you, nothing makes you tense like thousands of people wanting to kill you. Hell, people are.
Oh no, someone has injected politics into my video games. There you were, uh, killing a billionaire in Hitman 3, and suddenly it was ruined because someone pointed out the political undertones of that. Oh no, there you were, uh, watching Ghostbusters, and someone said, "Oh, I love Ghostbusters. It's just a shame that this movie has a lot of conservative undertones in the themes. Oh, it's a shame how politics affects everything around us on a daily basis. And in fact, if you don't think it does, that might be a sign that you are in the fortunate position of that being a privilege that you don't have to think about politics every day in some way." And now that that intro is out of the way, welcome to my latest bad idea for a video. I was thinking, and let's just try and chill it down a little bit. Let's try and get the tone down a little bit. I was thinking, in the most non-judgmental, non-confrontational way, that it is difficult sometimes to be a left-leaning nerd slash dork slash, I'm even going to drop the bad word, gamer. It's difficult to be left-wing sometimes in internet spaces because we live in a neoliberal hellscape where corporations will put on a rainbow flag and a face of progressivism, but then as soon as Pride Month is over, go back to severing healthcare for trans people from their insurance policies or whatever it is they feel like doing that day. Um, they will say, "Oh, we love we love all of our fans of every shape and shade and creed, but also we're not going to pay you properly." You know, we live in this world where even the corporations know that it's a good idea to appear progressive, but they will then just not do that. They will have a token gesture of progressivism and then continue to exploit the workers for their labor. But I said I was going to keep this chill, at least at the beginning, and I've already broken that promise. Um, I was only thinking I made a video about a year ago touching very briefly on a toxicity problem in the nerd sphere, and this is tangentially relevant. But I was also thinking, like, it can be difficult to be a leftist on the internet because, you know, how do you stay morally consistent? How do you stay ideologically coherent when we exist in a world where every food product on the shelf will have some level of exploitation involved, if not outright slave labor, like fucking Nestle or Coca Cola, whichever one it was? Probably both, let's be honest. How do you stay true to your ideals and your well thought out thoughts about how the world works when just owning a PlayStation means that you have, in some tiny way, contributed to the atrocious conditions of the people who tear those minerals out of the ground and the people who put that machine together for nothing remotely resembling a living wage. And before someone swoops in and says, "Oh well, that's just communist China manufacturing those things," why do you think all the corporations go to China for their labor? It's because that's where it's cheapest. That's where they have the biggest profit margin. The, it is capitalism, my dudes. Be it state or corporate directed, it is capitalism. But I was thinking about, as well, how to put this. I think there's a long-standing issue where, gaming has never been truly a boys' club. The perception that it's a boys' club is very old, and that perception kind of ties into as gaming and other nerd cultures. This applies to things like Dungeons and Dragons as well as they became more popular and more mainstream. More people not only joined the hobby but wanted to make it more publicly known that they were in the hobby, and this threatened, the old stubborn guard of dudes, usually white, usually dudes, usually straight, usually cis. Um, this threatened them, and they said, no, no, no. I want this thing to be kept as is. I want the mythic past upon which my identity is based to remain pure and unchanged. And that's why I'm going to say the N word. I'm obviously exaggerating for comedy, but you don't have to look far. There are YouTube channels with literally a million subscribers whose entire business model is just let's find one silly person on Twitter and pretend that's what being a leftist means, or that's what being a liberal means. Not the same thing, by the way. And I guess in a long-winded way, I'm trying to say I think about this a lot because, you'll go to YouTube, the amount of times I've been on YouTube or whatever, and there's a content creator whose video I like, and then I try to watch something else they've done, and within 5 minutes they've dropped an R slur, or they just casually dismiss a minority group as complaining, SJW, politically correct, whatever the fuck, Um, which incidentally, I don't know where this idea that the left aren't funny comes from, because have you seen conservative comedy recently? As well as just being mean spirited, it's the same two jokes over and again. It's just like it's either X minority sucks or I hate my wife. Those are the two conservative jokes. But to get back to something resembling a point, I mentioned my previous video about like toxic nerd culture and stuff, and that ties into this because, I'm not saying, oh, if you're not a left libertarian cool person like me, then I don't want to hear your opinion. There are definitely, I even mentioned Ghostbusters before. There's plenty of entertainment that I like, despite arguably, and all art is subjective, but there's plenty of entertainment I like, despite arguably being quite conservative or even just liberal in its politics, Hollywood is not exactly a leftist organization. I would say it's liberal at best. Well, I'd say it's fiercely liberal. It's just, they also aren't afraid to just let fucking horrible hate speech in there too. But when I say that, there are plenty of hateful leftists and liberals, just like there are plenty of hateful conservatives. I would say simply that it is hard to avoid certain toxicity. Just try to look up nerdy videos about The Last Jedi without encountering YouTube channels whose first letters may or may not begin with Q and end in ing, and the name is the quartering. He's never gonna find me. Um, there are plenty of shitty YouTube channels whose just entire careers are I'm going to interpret this the worst way possible and blame feminism for this movie being bad that I don't like. Um, it's difficult to get away from that, and I guess all you can do is seek out the nice places, the constructive places. One of the issues with, and again, I really feel like I'm generalizing here, but one of the issues is people like that just they approach art uncritically, which is fine on a personal level if that's all you want to do. If you want to approach art as like this is just a thing I like, that's fine. But if you go on the internet and say I don't like this thing because it made me think, and I don't like it when it tries to make me understand the plight of other people who experiences they might experience the world in a worse way than me or just a different way. It's very quickly becomes anti-intellectualism when you approach art as like it either appeals to me exclusively or I don't like it, which frankly is what a lot of that content boils down to. If Star Wars isn't exactly the way I like it, then it's bad and there's a secret agenda to make all your kids gay, turn the frickin' frogs gay. If it is silly to me how we live in a world where literally it's not an exaggeration to say the planet is on fire. And whose fault is that? Gonna blow your mind here. It's the 1%. It's overwhelmingly the people with the money, which means the people with the power, which means the people who make all the factories go, and they burn the planet and they burn the people, quite frankly, just to make their line go up on a chart. You know, I guess what I'm saying is it's silly to me that we live in a world where the 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 outcome of 150 years of capitalism is all around us, plain to see, and yet we can't talk about that unambiguously. We can't say, oh, it's bad that capitalism is destroying the planet without that being a controversial statement. You know, there are who do you think is doing that? And to bring it back home to video games and shit a bit, you know, video games is dominated by three large companies basically. Obviously, it's not that simple, but they're the three big console manufacturers, and also Microsoft, which also has an iron grip on the PC market. Although you could argue Valve has the iron grip on the software, and Microsoft, well, operating system is software. You see what I mean? The point is, if you like video games, then you kind of have to contribute, at least in some small, tiny way, to the money of assholes, and that sucks. And I think we should be able to say that. I don't judge people for, individually buying Amazon Prime subscriptions or whatever, because I know that that doesn't really mean anything in the grand scheme of things. It's a nice, good thing to do to recycle your milk bottles, but even if every person in the world recycled all of their milk bottles, that wouldn't make a dent in the global pollution every day from factories pumping out disposable goods that are meant to be bought once and then thrown away on the landfill. You know, it's good to have principles. It's good to do what you can, but everyone acting like an individual as if we don't all exist, unfortunately, in a society, does not actually make that's not the solution. Even if we all had electric cars, that would not be anywhere near as good for the environment versus if we started using public transport properly. If we created the public infrastructure to make public transport less shit than it is in a lot of countries, certainly a lot of the UK has awful public transport. Trains cost, it apparently costs more to get a train from one part of England to another part of England than to get like an all day ticket to travel all the way across Germany, however you like, on the train. The last I checked. Um, Laptop is going to sleep just as I'm beginning to form a coherent sentence. It's we have to look out for each other. We have to be an inclusive place. We have to say, I don't care if you're a liberal or even a generic conservative, if you're this kind of conservative who just wants low taxes and all that shit, that's fine. I just think as soon as you become authoritarian, I take issue. I would say the same if you're a liberal who says a lot of hateful slurs. I'd say no, get out of here. And if you're a leftist, or at least claim to be a leftist, but you're actually an authoritarian, like tanky person, or a Nazbol, which is a term I don't blame you for. If if you're not terminally online like me, don't worry. You don't need to know. It's a curse to know these things. I don't think any. I think you're the wiser person for not knowing these things. My point is we need to create better spaces. We need to maintain them, and I don't know. I don't want to use the word police for obvious reasons, but we need to maintain them, and maintaining an inclusive environment means excluding the intolerant. Do not tolerate people who mess up a community by being intolerant, even if they're not physically doing anything. If they're being a shithead, give them a warning, give them two warnings, and then get rid of them. Doesn't mean they can never come back, doesn't mean people can't redeem themselves. I believe genuinely people are overwhelmingly redeemable, just like most people are not truly lazy. It is a horrible myth that, like, oh, if you can't pay the bills, you can't feed your family, then you're just lazy. Get a third job. You're not working hard enough. Meanwhile, Jeff Bezos earns more money than any human could ever use in 1,000 lifetimes. He's not working 1,000 times strong more than anyone else. He's just in the position of power that he can reap all the money. So what am I trying to say here? What am I trying to say? I want to live in a world where we can, well, not even a world, an online community where we can discuss real life issues, and even when we're chilling out and trying to escape from reality with video games, I want to be able to discuss the artistic merits of that. I would like to, I can put on a conservative lens, a conservative analytical lens. I can look at Metal Gear. People do play Metal Gear and come away with a conservative interpretation. You know, a lot of those games involve having the Soviet Union as one of the antagonists. So you could play Metal Gear and think, oh yeah, this is all about shooting communists. And because I don't know the difference between left libertarianism, left authoritarianism, that's the same thing to me. Um, Sorry, that sounded judgmental. I'm trying to be on my best behavior. But when, you know, the world sucks, really does, and the only response that capitalists have to the state of the world is either denial or deflection. It's either everything's fine, what are you talking about? There is no climate change, or it's well, yeah, things are shit, but it's not our fault. It's not capitalism's fault. It's the enemy within or the enemy without. It's their fault. They're the reason we can't be happy. Um, there's a huge rail strike that just started today in the UK, and most people are generally on board. You know, it's purely my anecdotal evidence, but you know, when they do polls and things, most people do understand the need and the use of strikes and unions in general. But they try and whip it up. They try and the tabloid press and politicians, they try and whip it up as like, oh, I can't believe this train strike. I can't believe they would do this to you for no reason. They would ruin your holiday for no reason. And it's not because we've driven them to do this, by to use their one power they have, which is to organize their labor and protest because the conditions and their pay are so abysmal. And this entire time I meant to mention, speaking of conditions and pay that are relevant to nerd culture, there is finally a movement in the gaming industry to unionize because the conditions of working under crunch and such in the industry have been legendarily awful for as long as I can remember, even before I was really conscious that such things were worth worrying about. You know, as a kid, I remember reading about how studios would work there. You know, people would live under their desks and just not leave the building for weeks, basically, to get a game out the door. And you know, you've got Activision management accused of all sorts of horrible things, and meanwhile the CEO is a billionaire, and they're treating their employees like shit. You if you can't just uproot and go to another game company without losing possibly your only chance to get into the game industry for years and years. You know, people can't risk their livelihoods just on the off chance that there's a nicer game company um, within the same town, incidentally, without having to physically move away. Um, all of your favorite games were probably made using a bit of crunch, unless you exclusively play indie games or something, and even then, that's no guarantee. You know, all of your favorite hobbies to some extent involve human abuse through management, through power structures, and we should be able to talk about that. We should be able to talk about how it all interconnects. And that doesn't mean that you have to feel guilty about everything. That doesn't mean that you can't have Amazon Prime. That doesn't mean any of these things. But I also believe a better world is possible. I also believe a world where people provide according to their means and take according to their needs. I believe in solidarity. I believe in working together to protecting each other And that includes in our free time. That includes in the things that might seem trivial, but they're part of the human experience. And we need to do whatever small part of the internet that we have, we need to make that as safe and welcoming as possible. And maybe you don't have the energy to do that as a full-time hobby or anything, but it's all about what you can do and what you can put your energy into the way it's the most useful. I'm a social mess. I can't go outside without it being a whole process of getting ready to look presentable to the world. But I do my best where I can. You know, even if all you do on a regular basis is make sure that you have some change on you and say hello to the homeless person you always know is on your street and make sure that you give them what change you have to spare, that's making a difference. That makes their day potentially, you know. I hope that's not sounding patronizing to yourself or them. I'm definitely rambling now. I've stopped myself 3 or 4 times while making this recording because I had to stop and clear my head. And I think the hardest part was dragging it back to the original kind of gimmick of nerd hobbies through a left-wing perspective. To end it on a positive note again, because I think overall this is a positive message I'm carrying. I just worry constantly it sounds negative, but we can make a better community. We can make better communities. We can make a better world, and that starts with making better communities. I don't know exactly what kind of glorious world I would like to exist. Maybe it's too idealistic. I don't know how what feasible effort can be done, what feasible vision of the future can be reached, but we can start by affecting the people around us. We can start by saying, actually, this person on the server keeps dropping R slurs. If you're in a Team Fortress 2 server or some shit, and someone keeps dropping the R slur, maybe tell them, hey, you know, I'm sure you don't mean anything by it, but please don't do that. And if they keep doing it, they were warned. They can go fucking find a server where people aren't, you know, expected to feel safe and welcome, you know. That's you know, they're free to do that. They're free to have a shithead server, but if you know, they're not entitled to exist in a community of people who want to feel like everyone's welcome. Everyone's welcome until this, you know, what's that old saying? You're free to swing your fist until it hits my face. You know what I mean? You're free to swing your fist as long as you're over there. You know. Um, yeah. I hope you're having a good day/night. And remember, we're all squishy pink little humans, but we are all individuals. And I think one of the great crimes of, you know, putting people down and not being inclusive is that it crushes those little sparks, the little snowflakes that we all are, you know, which I use that word deliberately facetiously, but we can make a better world, and it all starts with acknowledging that we're all basically the same, but we're all different in little ways too. It's an interesting kind of paradox in a way, but that's how we make people actually feel welcome in this world, is acknowledging what makes us the same, but also the differences that mean we have to accommodate for people's needs and what they're able to contribute and what they need to take. And in the end, maybe we need a new gamer word, and the new gamer word should be communism. No, being nice to each other. That's not a word. Communism it is.
It's down. Well done, 47. Head for an exit, and we'll speak again soon.